Hello, everyone. My name is Polong, and I'm joined today by Elia, my teammate. We're both developer advocates for Google Cloud. And today we'll be talking about the ABCs of agent building with ADK and beyond. And actually, taking a step back, it's more around the agent development lifecycle. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and share a little bit of a story towards the end as well. So over the last year with agent building, I think the spectrum of the kinds of agents that people are building has expanded quite dramatically, right? We have agents that are typically sort of like your chatbot agents that you might, deploy to your website to help people answer questions about, your service, your company's questions, FAQs, that sort of thing. Then you also have some agents that are used to help you automate some processes, to help you augment your workflows so that you might run on a scheduled basis, on a regular basis, just to automate some things without you having to monitor something all the time, 24/7. And then you also have some agents that are a little bit more of low latency agents that you may want to be running multi-modality with it as well, maybe to help you play a video game, maybe to help you build Lego buildings, as you might see on the demo floor as well. So all of these different kinds of agents are sort of like the gamut of the kinds of agents that people might be thinking about building and productionizing as well. Now, when it comes to a framework such as Agent Development Kit or ADK, just a show of hands, who is familiar with ADK? OK, a good, healthy number. OK, that's great. So ADK as a framework is really just enabling you to build agents that have the intelligence through a model with the ability to perform actions. That's kind of how we typically define an AI agent, model plus action. And when we look at the kinds of reasons why we might think of needing a framework, you might think, oh, do we really need something like ADK? Do we really need frameworks in the world of coding agents and agent harnesses? Well, you might think of, oh, yes, I could simply vibe code my own agent really easily. But, and yes, you could. You could absolutely solve many different use cases by creating your own bespoke agents that are completely customized to your liking, and that's completely fine. But there could be instances where you might be hit with a ceiling fairly rapidly. So for example, let's say you want to add the ability to add MCP servers to your agent with skills, with compatibility with A2A protocol, with the ability to also use A2UI, or all these different protocols, or ability to remember to have your agents keep track of sessions, memory management, guardrails. All of these different things, you'd have to almost vibe code individual components and make sure they all work really nicely together, and also be able to share with others as well. And that can be challenging. And that's why a framework like ADK, which we've been using extensively within Google to help build agents for internal workloads as well, helps us bring the best practices to accelerate how quickly you can actually create, build, and use agents in production. So that's sort of like the theme of this talk today. How do we think about this, but from a code-first perspective, right? And with ADK, it's easy to use. For those of you who have tried it, which is most of you, it's modular flexible. You can test it really quickly locally. You have native multimodal support. And one of the greatest things that we've been hearing is that it's optimized for Gemini models, but you can also use a variety of different kinds of models with ADK. And it's also platform agnostic. Certainly, you can. It's optimized for Google Cloud, but you can also use ADK on a variety of different cloud platforms as well. So when it comes to ADK, you have all these like bells and whistles that come together to make it really easy for you to build agents with code that is as simple as define your agent with a model, give it a name, instructions, and tools. It's quite simple. But really, that's the simplest part. Creating your agent now, right? Creating ADK agents is probably going to be the easiest part of your entire agent development lifecycle. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of the ease, and how is it so easy compared to everything else? What's actually difficult? Well, we need to evaluate to make sure these agents are running as expected. We need to make sure that it's connected to our data sources, whether it's external data sources or data sources within your company. You have to add in security to make sure your agents aren't going awry. You have to guardrail it. You have to integrate it with different protocols. You have to add CI/CD, observability, deployment, make it available for your end users. Lots of these different things are all part of this agent development lifecycle. And that's where Agent Platform on Google Cloud provides the most comprehensive suite of products to make it easy for you to do all these different things. Now, realistically, we could probably be spending like an hour just talking about all these different products and looking through all the documentation of all these different products. And that's a lot. That's a lot of things to look through. So what if there was an easy way in this world where everyone's using a coding agent, whether it's anti-gravity or a different, whichever coding agent? What if there's a way to make this all a lot easier to help you with the agent development lifecycle? So Elia, could you maybe show us how that might look like?
So I'd like to actually start with like a quick poll in the room. How many of you are using coding agents like anti-gravity, Cloud Code as part of your development workflow? OK, pretty much everyone in the room here. So I think like we started to realize, I think from the beginning of this year really, that each one of us will start to use coding agents more and more to build systems, right? And I personally, whenever I need to build an agent with ADK, I personally open anti-gravity and I start saying, OK, I need to build this agent. Here's my constraint. How do I build it? But like humans, agents can struggle, can hallucinate, can make mistakes, can make bad design choices, right? And they will need to navigate all this big portfolio of ecosystem. So we wanted to fix that. We wanted to offer a way for your coding agent and yourself to improve over time and to actually offer you an accelerated journey to production so that your agent can be served by real user in a short amount of time. This is where we introduce Agents CLI. Agents CLI is a set of CLI command interface and a set of skills that allows your coding agent to build ADK agents in Agent Platform quickly. We want to offer a place for you to accelerate the full development lifecycle. So, like typically when you're developing an agent, you will go through different phases, yeah? And we want to offer support in each of these phases here. Starting from the first phase, which is defining the scope of the use case, the personas you like to solve, then exploring tools, then designing the architecture together with the agent, then starting implementing the use case together. So like you'll do some context engineering, you'll implement some tools, you'll evaluate, right? And most times you will go through different cycles of evaluation where you'll evaluate, understand there is some issues, and then go back into prompting and implementing tools to improve the use case. You'll then start having internal users testing your agent, and then finally you'll go into a deployment phase where you'll deploy the infrastructure, you'll set up CI/CD, you'll set up a production environment, and then you'll actually want to observe the result of your agent so that you can get insights, so that you can iterate back. This is really important because you're not going to do this cycle one single time, right? We expect you to go through this cycle over and over. And for us, we want to make you successful in making sure you're going over this cycle as fast as possible, yeah? And so we want to make sure like, we can do it, and we introduce Agents CLI specifically for that. Starting with Agents CLI is a single command line call. UVX Google Agents CLI setup. This will automatically install a set of skills and the CLI command interface into your environment. Once you do that, it's a matter of simply opening up your coding agent. It can be any coding agent, anti-gravity, Cloud Code, Cursor. The list, I think we counted more than 50 coding agents we support. And you can simply ask, hey, I want to build an agent that does something. Here's my constraints, and you can let Agents CLI help you into this development process. Let us show you through a demo on what the experience looks like. So you can see here we have an anti-gravity 2.0 interface. And as part of my laptop, I actually install Agents CLI. So anti-gravity has knowledge of Agents CLI and all the skills available. As part of this demo, I want to build an SRE agent because I like to actually have an agent that is capable of automatically defining whether a certain log is critical, if it needs action, and what are the steps to remediate a certain error. So I'll ask anti-gravity, in this case here, let's use Agents CLI to build our SRE agent. And I want to accept raw server log, parse them, classify each event, and then assign like a level of criticality of it, and then generate a structured incident report. So what Agents CLI will do in partnership with anti-gravity here, it will for sure load up all the skills that Agents CLI offers, and then we'll start asking you questions. So really important, we don't jump into implementation yet. This is literally the same to what I will do if you were to ask me, I want to build an agent, right? Typically, you want to ask more questions. You want to brainstorm with the user. What are the different implementation criteria you want to be achieved? You know, OK, you want to build this SRE agent, but how the input is going to look like? What are the tools that this agent will need to support? Does it need to also have any security constraint? Maybe you want to offer an agent to, say, your external users. You don't want to mention competitors. You don't want to do certain activities. You want to make sure the agent does one thing and does it really well, right? And then where do you want to deploy it? Because depending on the deployment choice, it might take actually different actions. So do you want to have a prototype first? You want to deploy it in agent platform or somewhere else? So you can actually express as a user all these preferences together with anti-gravity. And so in this case here, I kept it really simple, like we're in a demo, right? So I just said, OK, the input is going to look like Google Cloud logs, and the agent can actually use Google search. This is important because like maybe I'm saying there is a problem with my DB. I want actually the agent to search on Google search for similar issues to provide a remediation for it. And then I don't need any safety constraint because I'm developing internally here. So what the agent will do with your requirements is we'll actually create a spec. So a spec that is kind of defining his understanding of the use case, right? So like the overview, the input, the expected output of the use case, and then tools required, constraints, and success criteria. Now, this is a really simple spec, of course, right? Simple requirement. In real life, these specs tend to be even like 500 lines, right? But it's important you do this phase. It's important the agent has an understanding of what you want to build. Because you want to make sure like he has a really good plan so that you don't need too much intervention during the execution. So it will define the spec. You can review it together with the agent. It will also define an implementation plan with all the proposed changes to the code base. In this case, we are starting from scratch. So it will say, OK, I'm going to scaffold. I'm going to use the Agents CLI command line interface to scaffold an SRE agent, and the type is ADK. And then I'm going to go into the agent, and I'm going to change some files as part of it. I'm going to define the output schema, and I'm going to verify that this works. So as a user, you always are in the loop, and you can always say, looks good to me, or it doesn't look good to me, right? And critically, a part that is super important here is that we are not asking the anti-gravity agent to write all the code by himself. We're actually asking to leverage the Agents CLI interface to actually scaffold and starting point of like what the repo is going to look like. This way here, we make sure you are adopting a standardized interface that is following some of the best practices we are introducing. So as a user, I can say, it looks good to me. Let's proceed with the implementation. So what anti-gravity will do here, it will work for like a minute. It's super fast, right? And as part of it, we'll be able to execute the implementation plan. So it will scaffold. It will install dependencies. It will then start changing the code. So actually, we can see here all the diff of everything it changed in the code. So it removed the dummy agent with scaffold. It's a get weather agent. And as part of it, it changed it to an SRE agent with 3.5 flash with a set of instructions like you're a SRE agent. This is your task. These are the logs. This is how you classify the logs. This is the output JSON structure. And this is Google search as a tool call. So we leverage all the functionality of ADK to achieve that. And we make sure that all the native functionalities and all the best practices within ADK and within agent platform are part of the knowledge of the coding agent that you are going to use. So it will do that. It will then also author an evaluation set, right? So this is an important piece that we actually discovered when building Agents CLI. The right interface for a coding agent is actually something programmatic. So as a human, we will check later, we are going to use ADK Web Playground to actually test this agent. But the agent needs something more programmatic to get a feeling on how the agent is performing. This is where evaluation plays a key part. So what we are going to do here is automatically, anti-gravity will author a set of example prompts based on the spec we define together. And those prompts will be then sent to the ADK agent, which will then respond. And then based on the responses, we are going to start an evaluation process. So we are going to say, oh, this response doesn't really look good against our metrics. This response looks good. And so there will be an iteration phase where you can imagine the agent making some changes to the code, then running evaluation, getting a feeling on how the agent is performing. If there is like some gaps, changing again the prompt, rerunning the evaluation until your success criteria that we define together during the spec, really important, are met. In this case, the success criteria are really simple. But in a real case scenario, you might have complex success criteria. And so you want to make sure you are building confidence on your use case through the evaluation process. Now, we build a use case. The evaluation has run successfully, just 3 cases, and it accomplished the result. But I don't really trust my agent. I don't know about you. I have issues in trusting always the agents, right? So I would like to get a feeling on how this agent is performing. As I mentioned, there are better interfaces for humans to achieve that. So ADK offers a local playground that in a matter of seconds, you can instantly spin it up to have a testing on your agent. So for example, here, we already have like the playground spin up with like an example question, like this is our a log that we might want to test with our agent. I can hit enter here. This is going to invoke Gemini live. And it's going to actually perform like a couple of tool calls to search on Google. And you can see actually on the left side the shape of the agent. And boom, this is the response that the agent generated. So in a matter of minutes, we literally build an agent capable of doing SRE log triaging. You can see even it made some searches on Google to understand like what are similar kind of issues, and it responded to us. So we can get a feeling, not only with the agent, but also as a human on how the agent is performing, right? Now, let's say now I have enough confidence in my use case, I did different phases of evaluation, and I like to deploy it. So it's the same thing here. Like there are so many deployment options. Remember the slide that Polong showed you? So many deployment options. How to choose which? How do you manage persistence? How do you manage security? There are so many different options you can choose from. Agents CLI can help you in choosing those options. Now, let's say I want to simplify the demo, and I just want to say, OK, I'll be OK. I know agent runtime is great. It's a managed platform to deploy any kind of agent in agent platform. I know agent runtime is great. Let's deploy towards agent runtime. And so what Agent CLI will do is we'll actually create a plan for you to achieve that. So it will run another scaffolding exercise. Again, really important. We are not asking anti-gravity to write the code in YOLO mode, right? We're actually saying we have a set of best practices. We have a set of like code we maintain as engineering team, so to help you deploy this agent in agent runtime. So we will scaffold those files. Then it will reinstall the dependencies, and then finally will deploy. So a couple of minutes later, you have an agent deployed in your project, which is amazing, right? So you can kind of think, OK, all good. Now we deploy Polong. Our job is done, right?
Deployment is probably the first step of many steps. So deployment is just the first thing. So I think one of the first things that we might want to think about is what does CI/CD might look like? Ooh. And then I can also show the audience a little bit more about like what does observability look like as well, because the agent development lifecycle, it's way more than just building your agent and deploying it. So let's take a look at the CI/CD workflow.
Perfect, and you actually raised a really good point. This is just a simple deployment to a development project, but would you really deploy like this if you have like 1,000 users consuming your service? Maybe you want to make sure certain things are tested in a staging environment before you actually put your agent, put your product in front of your users. Like, you don't want the service to be flooded with requests. You want to make sure things are working well in integration. All the permissions, all these things are actually tested before you do that. In short, you want to build confidence in your agent, both from an operational standpoint and from the evaluation quality standpoint, before you actually put it in front of real users. And so this is where CI/CD is a really important part of the lifecycle. Similar with application, we want to make sure our agent runtime goes through a CI/CD phase, which means making sure we are doing unit tests, integration tests, load tests in a remote fashion through our agent. And so, also similar things with deployment. There are so many options, so many ways to achieve that. Agents CLI offers different options to achieve this goal here. You can use GitHub Action, you can use Cloud Build, you can even modify it depending on how you want to fine-tune your deployment methodology. You can simply say, OK, I want to make a plan for setting up my SRE agent, and I want to deploy it with the CI/CD. So let's make a plan for it. So what Agents CLI can do, together with the skills we provide, it will say, OK, let's have a look at all the files in the repo. I want to check my authentication in Google Cloud. And then as a result of it, it will actually create a plan. So a plan that might require some scaffolding. Again, we don't let the agent write Terraform as it is. We want to make sure it's leveraging a set of opinionated best practices. So it will scaffold all the files for it. It will make sure some files are added. And then it's saying, OK, looks like if you want to run this command, this will actually deploy all the CI/CD. So it will set up all the CI/CD for you. And then whenever you're ready, you can make it actually a commit. And this will trigger the deployment to production. So the final result of all this deployment process will look like this. So you'll have an agent in your console playground deployed in a production environment, ready to be used by user. You can see here some sessions already being used. So actually, Polong, why don't you show how we can go one step more and see how we can then observe this agent?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to take over here on the demo here. So for those of you who haven't used Google Cloud Agent Platform here, we are in the agent side, so agent platform, and then under agents. And then under agents, we have gone to the deployment section. So we have a number of different agents that we've previously deployed. But here I'm clicking on the one that Elia has pre-deployed for us already with some sample sessions. So now that it's deployed, we might want to say, what were some of the conversations that people had with this particular deployed agent? Can we inspect it a little bit just to make sure these conversations were actually OK and that the agent was working as expected? So we can click on traces. And under traces, because there's over 100 different sessions that happened and 100 different IDs here, we can choose any one of these and sort of take a look. What was the input for this? What was the system message? OK, it's here. We've got the system message. We've got the input message from the user. And then the agent began to trigger a couple of tool calls. And eventually, it responded with this incident report. So it's kind of working as expected, which is great. And it's great to be able to inspect this directly from the UI, right? But then the next question becomes, OK, we've now had over 100 different interactions with our agent. Is Elia's agent that he created without having any user feedback whatsoever, was his agent perfect from the very beginning? Probably not. We kind of want to maybe consider catering the agent based off of the traces that we're getting. So, but it's kind of hard at the same time. There's hundreds of sessions here. It's very hard for me to inspect every single one of these sessions and be like, OK, they talked about this in this session. This talked about this other thing in this other session. It'd be great if we could look at the trends across all of these different sessions. So one of the great things about Elia's workflow is that through Agents CLI, you can also switch on observability when you deploy to agent runtime. You can say, hey, I also want to add in observability, and then export all of these traces to BigQuery. And BigQuery, if you don't know, is the data warehouse on Google Cloud, where we can store all these sessions of traces, so you can run SQL commands to help you do any sort of analysis on all these different sessions, which is also a lot to think about doing. We have to look at the BigQuery documentation. We have to write SQL. We have to do all these different things. So of course, wouldn't it be great if we could use anti-gravity to help us with this? So the first thing that we can do is just say, hey, let's inspect the traffic for the SRE agent in this particular project. So it calls upon the skills. It checks to make sure it's using the right BigQuery table. It's going to now generate the SQL query, which is right here. So it creates a query to help us analyze across all these different sessions. And it creates some sort of informed report of hey, this is what happened across all these different sessions. And this is what it looks like. This is the traffic analysis. Here's the total number of turns across all these different sessions, number of tool calls. And it even generated a diagram of like how these interactions seem to be happening between the user and between this deployed agent. And this is all done through anti-gravity with Agents CLI. Again, making it so much easier for me as a developer to be able to understand what happened with this deployed agent. OK, so it's gotten all this analysis, and it's all looking great. Wouldn't it be also nice if it could also propose some changes, some improvements to the agent, the underlying agent code, based off of what it's seen, based off of the traffic? So OK, propose 1 or 2 changes. And it says, the first proposal says to reduce latency and token overhead via some tool consolidation. So based off of its analysis with BigQuery, it found that the agent seems to be calling sequential tool calls resulting in 3 conversation turns. And that could be consolidated by reducing it down to just two calls. And so that could reduce latency. It could reduce amount of tokens that are spent. So OK, that's a great proposal. The second proposal, it says to improve the way that it's masking secrets. So currently, it only looks at like alphanumeric characters, but let's also include symbols. So OK, that seems like a good proposal as well. So given this like proposal, this set of changes, how do we then make sure that that flows within the overall agent development lifecycle? So we could say, let's do it. Let's make a commit and push to main. And then the first thing it says, well, hold on. Let's first, again, think through a proper implementation plan. What are we going to do? How are we going to go about approaching it? And then approve it as a human first before it goes ahead and actually makes those changes. And then once it does make those changes, we're going to actually go into the CI/CD workflow to show you what that looks like, the same way that Agents CLI actually set it up based off of Elia's samples that he showed you. So we're in this GitHub repo, and you can see the latest commit that was done close to yesterday. And it's gone through 2 sort of workflows in GitHub Actions. So the first is it deployed and tested in a staging environment. So this is a deployed agent in a separate staging project where we can try it, we can test it, we can do some load testing before we actually serve it to production to end users. So there's just 2 key steps here. Number 1 is it deploys to the staging environment. So it's got a URL for this that's deployed. Excellent. That's one of the steps. The next step is it actually also runs a load test. So let's say our agent, our SRE agent, we're expecting, I don't know, up to 1,000 users using it at the same time. And we might want to just be able to make sure that we're not going to have any sort of like surprises in our SRE triage agent. So wouldn't that be nice to have a load test and see the results? Now, lots of lines of stuff happening. Wouldn't it be great if we could see this a bit more nicely? So it also generates a report, again, through Agents CLI to help us understand, here's the load test. Here's the total number of requests per second. Here's what happens in terms of the first response. There's a little bit of a cold start, which we have to take into account. And what happens as we increase the number of requests or increase the number of users, we can see all these stats in this like self-generated report here as well. And we could be like, OK, that sounds good. That's great. Let's go ahead and push that to production. And that triggers a second workflow upon our approval, where we can then say, OK, that's great. And now it actually deploys to production without, of course, any load tests. And that becomes the end result that's served to users. So that's sort of like the end-to-end agent development lifecycle, right? We went through the building of an agent, first scaffolding, understanding the design specs through an implementation plan. And so Elia showed you how to build an agent in ADK with just a couple lines of prompts and just evaluating, making sure everything works OK. Then Elia did some local evaluation, again through anti-gravity in Agents CLI to help you with this. So it rapidly just did all these evaluations on its own to make sure it works. As a human, you can then test it in the ADK web playground that perhaps many of you have used, and to make sure that it's working as expected. If you're happy with it locally, you can deploy to staging, and then you can set up some CI/CD workflows, inspect it in the agent platform UI to take a look at the sessions to make sure they're all good, inspect the analysis in BigQuery, and then eventually put this all together by checking to see how the traffic is operating in production, and then improve it to the next iteration, the next version in staging, and then finally to production. So what does this look like in terms of the agent development lifecycle? And I promised that I would tell you a bit of a story here. So have you all heard of the story of the 3 blind men and the elephant? Yeah? So there's a story, for those of you who've never heard the story, is there's 3 blind men, and they approach this creature they've never seen before, ever in their lives. this large creature, but they're blind, so they haven't seen it before. They've never encountered it before. So they approach the creature, and one blind man touches it and says, "Oh, this is a tree trunk." It's actually touching the leg of the elephant, of course. And then the other blind man goes to the front of the creature and then touches it. It's like, "Oh, that's a snake, right? That's obviously a snake, but it's just the trunk of the elephant, the nose." And then the other blind man goes to the back of the creature and then touches it. "Oh, that's a bit of rope, but it's actually just the tail with a bit of fur." So these three blind men are just kind of perceiving bits and pieces of this larger picture, which is the elephant. And so this is sort of true as well with the agent development lifecycle. Like, you may be involved in just building the agent, but not thinking about the end-to-end workflow. You may just be thinking about the deployment step or just the DevOps step, but not thinking about how do agents get built by the agent developer. So with coding agents like Anti-Gravity, and now with Agents CLI, super cheesy, but your blindfold is now off, and then you can kind of see the whole creature, you see the whole elephant. So that's sort of like how I see Agents CLI in this whole agent development lifecycle. You can kind of, with the help of Anti-Gravity or your favorite coding agent, with Agents CLI, these skills and commands, you can walk through the entire lifecycle with so much more ease and so much faster, much more quickly than ever before. So that is really the session. And Elia, are there any closing remarks?
I think we are really curious to hear your feedback. Please try it. We have actually a GitHub link. And really, we're super curious. You can use it with any coding agent. We actually have a team specifically working on how Agents CLI performs with different coding agents. So we're actually evaluating it. And so to make sure it works for your coding agent. So please try, let us know, and super curious to hear the feedback.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.